This is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for stand-up Democrats. I'm your host, Jim Cuddy. There's a lot of talk about the seamy side of politics in New Jersey, but author Terry Golway maintains that political machines used to do some good, at least in New York. Former Senator Dixon looks back also at a career that began with the blessing of the Illinois Democratic machine. And Bill Press talks with Republican-turned-independent Senate candidate Larry Pressler. Are you tired of Tea Party Republicans and Rush Limbaugh dominating the airwaves? Do you want the facts you won't get on Fox or even on CNN? Then stay tuned. Our sponsor, 21st Century Democrats, works hard to get everyday Democrats involved in returning our party to its roots and to success at the ballot box. Sit back and listen, then stand up and fight. And follow 21st Century Democrats on Facebook for all the latest progressive news. We're glad you can join us. Once upon a time, a political machine in New York called Tammany Hall pretty much controlled the National Democratic Party. Though it was known for corruption, author Terry Golway insists that it worked for the little guy before there was a social safety net. And joining us now on americasdemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for stand-up Democrats, Terry Golway is a professor at Keene University in New Jersey, a historian, author, and a journalist who has written for the New York Times and the New York Observer. His latest book, Machine Made, Tammany Hall, and the Creation of Modern American Politics. Terry Golway, thanks so much for joining us today on americasdemocrats.org.
It's my pleasure.
Now, a lot of people, including some Democrats, don't even know what Tammany Hall was. So, if you could, give us a brief explanation, because it was certainly more than just a building.
It certainly was. It was actually sort of a society, a private society that was founded not long after the American Republic was founded in the 1790s. But it actually really became just another name for the Democratic County Committee of New York, which is to say Manhattan. So in essence, Tammany Hall was the Democratic Party in Manhattan.
Who was Boss Tweed, and how did that name come to symbolize the worst in politics?
Well, Boss Tweed was the boss of Tammany Hall, which is to say that he was the biggest Democrat in Manhattan around the time of the Civil War, and certainly in the years afterwards. His real name was Bill Tweed, William Tweed. He was a congressman, a Democratic congressman from Manhattan, elected in 1852, served only one term, but through his shrewd political behavior and his own charisma, he became the top Democrat in Manhattan, and is a symbol of corruption because, well, he was corrupt. I mean, he shook down contractors. He built a courthouse near City Hall in Manhattan that still stands today, and basically raided the public treasury for extraordinary amounts of money, and because he was such a character in New York at a certain period of time in the 1860s and 70s, he really became the face of urban corruption, and sort of a symbol of Tammany Hall. Even though Tammany Hall went on for another 100 years, it never really could shake the reputation of its most infamous boss, William Tweed.
Now, Tammany is the iconic, if not the first, big city political machine, but machines usually work, don't they?
That's right. Teddy Roosevelt, of all people, because Teddy Roosevelt would have considered himself to be a reformer and not a machine politician, but Roosevelt himself observed that all good political organizations are machines. I mean, after all, a political organization exists to win elections. How do you win elections? Well, you get out the vote. How do you get out the vote? Well, there's lots of ways to do that, but machines have worked, I would argue, because they make a connection between politics and government and constituents. People will come out to vote for a reason. Maybe sometimes it's a positive reason, sometimes it's a negative reason, but people come out to vote, and that's what political organizations do. And I would argue that this idea of a machine is actually is actually a good thing, because it means that this political organization is doing what a political organization is supposed to do: win elections.
Absolutely. We're speaking with Terry Golway, professor at Keene University in New Jersey, the author of Machine Made, Tammany Hall and the Creation of Modern American Politics. You make the point that the traditional New Deal Democratic coalition of urban, minority, and lower-income voters was not really the creation of Franklin D. Roosevelt, but of Al Smith, who was the losing Democratic nominee in 1928. What was Smith's history in building the party?
Well, Al Smith is a historic figure, not of Obama proportions, but pretty similar in the sense that he was the first Catholic and first non-WASP to be nominated by a major party for president. And that happened, as you said, in 1928. And what Smith did in New York in the 19-teens and 1920s is that he helped create the modern Democratic Party that is inclusive. I mean, before that, in 1924, when the Democrats met in Madison Square Garden in New York, the leading candidate, he didn't wind up winning the nomination, but the leading candidate going into that convention had the support of the Ku Klux Klan. The Klan was, a fairly prominent caucus at the Democratic Convention in 1924. So the party at that time was dominated by sort of elite progressives like Woodrow Wilson and sort of Midwestern populists like William Jennings Bryan, who were very suspicious of cities. And so was Wilson. So the party before 1924 was not an urban party. Smith made it an urban party. He was a kid from the city streets, lost his father at the age of 13, came of age at the Fulton Fish Market in Manhattan, and what Al Smith came to symbolize really is the big city politician, and it's because of his influence that the Democratic Party became what it is today. This very urban, very ethnic, and very inclusive political organization.
Al Smith was progressive beyond his years.
He was. Smith, he later turned against Franklin Roosevelt and turned against the New Deal and did, frankly, become much more conservative. But I would argue that a lot of that was based in a personal bitterness towards Roosevelt. Smith had always considered Roosevelt to he treated Roosevelt almost as a child, and to see Roosevelt succeed where he himself, Smith, had failed, I think so embittered Smith that he turned against Roosevelt in the 1930s. It was really a tragic story, although the two reconciled in the 40s.
Mm-hmm. Now, wasn't FDR himself sort of against Tammany Hall before he was for it?
Oh, yes, he certainly was. In fact, he was elected in 1910 as a state senator from Dutchess County in upstate New York, which was, sort of very anti-urban, very suspicious of city Democrats. And Roosevelt made a great show during his first term as a state senator of opposing Tammany Hall. Then he resigned as state senator to go to work for Woodrow Wilson. But when he completes his political comeback in the 1920s, after he's, of course, been diagnosed with polio and lost the use of his legs, he still hasn't lost his ambitions, and he found a way to work with Tammany Hall, including working with Al Smith, through the 1920s, so that when Al Smith was nominated for president in 1928, now Al Smith is a Tammany man, a proud Tammany man. Well, who places his name in nomination? None other than Franklin Roosevelt. So I wouldn't say that Roosevelt would ever describe himself as being for Tammany Hall, but I think in essence he was a collaborator with Tammany Hall, and I mean that in the best sense of the word.
Mm-hmm. We're speaking with Terry Golway, professor at Keene University in New Jersey. He's written for the New York Times, the New York Observer, and his latest book is Machine Made, Tammany Hall and the Creation of Modern American Politics. The knock against big city machines is the obvious appearance and existence of graft and patronage. Did corruption outweigh any good that ward heelers provided the community?
I would say so. I mean, there's no question that political machines, including Tammany Hall, were corrupt. Of course, there are degrees of corruption, too. There's the Tweed corruption that we discussed before, which is gross, and then there's sort of what George Washington Plunkett, who was a member of Tammany Hall, referred to as honest graft, which is to say, you get a cut of a contract, or you make, basically it's inside information, right? So you make your fortune based on your knowledge of how politics works, and he thought that was an honest way of making a living, and frankly, other people agreed with him. But these ward healers, the army, the legion of people the Democratic Party had out in the neighborhoods, they knew their apartment houses, they knew their blocks, they knew what widow was having financial problems. They knew who needed help. And, this is the days long before Social Security. This is long before welfare. So the only institution that helped many of these mostly immigrant neighborhoods were their local Tammany ward healers. So, and by all accounts, they were not shaking down people. They were there simply as the eyes and ears of a political organization that knew it had to respond to its constituents. If Tammany didn't deliver these sorts of services, they would be voted out of office. So yes, I would argue that in the big picture, that these machines certainly accomplished more good than they did, achieve bad things as well.
Yeah, plenty of progressive social reform. New York, Chicago, Jersey, across the land.
Absolutely, and Jersey City, of course, had a fairly infamous political figure by the name of Frank Hague, who was mayor from 1918 till around 1947, and an unbelievable string. And he has a sort of very unprogressive reputation, which I think is somewhat undeserved, because in Jersey City, during Boss Hague's tenure, medical care in Jersey City was free.
How about that? Maybe there's something we can go back and learn.
I'll say. Exactly.
Now, before we let you go, how and why did Tammany Hall and the other big city machines die out?
Well, I think all of the machines really were creatures of immigrant cities. And once the stream of immigrants died out after 1924, when, against Tammany's wishes, the country cut down on immigration, the population of the cities they served changed. And let's face it, too, the New Deal had a lot to do with the machines dying out, because the machines provided social services, progressive social services, that then became more professionalized under the New Deal. So basically, government took over the role of the party and began providing these services that Tammany and other machines used to. So, the end was in sight once Franklin Roosevelt came into office and the New Deal was implemented. But I think that, the legacy of what these machines did, I think, is enshrined in our modern social welfare system, which, of course, is under attack today, in many ways under attack by the same forces that opposed Tammany Hall.
Bring back the machines.
Well, I'm all in favor of it.
Terry Golway, professor at Keene University in New Jersey. His most recent book, Machine Made, Tammany Hall and the Creation of Modern American Politics. Professor, thank you as always for joining us today on americasdemocrats.org. We look forward to doing it again soon.
Thank you.
All right, and this is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for stand-up Democrats. We want you to sit back and listen, but we need you to stand up and fight. Do you want to get involved and help get our party back to its roots and to success at the ballot box? You can make your contribution to Democrats for America's Future and help us keep this show going, and to elect Democrats who will stand up for democratic principles. Go to americasdemocrats.org and click on Donate at the top of the page. This is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for stand-up Democrats. Alan Dixon was a senator from Illinois and part of the Democratic leadership. He has some good things to say about the Chicago machine of the first Mayor Daley, and we'll talk to him about that in just a moment. Right now, we turn to Jim Hightower, America's #1 populist, for his common sense commentary.
Here's a jarring headline. Economic populism is a dead end for Democrats. That's the title on a recent op-ed piece written by a couple of longtime political flacks for Wall Street and published, naturally, in the Wall Street Journal. When the barons of big money start rolling out such scolding screeds, it's not because they really think populism is a loser, but because they're terrified by the fact that it has already gained mass appeal and is on the move all across grassroots America. Indeed, to put a thin veneer of legitimacy on this op-ed, they had to resort to the fiction that it is a political warning written to Democrats by Democrats, specifically by an inside-the-beltway outfit calling itself Third Way. But this group is to authentic Democratic Party principles what near beer is to stout, only not as close. Third Way is just the same old Wall Street way. While it wears a Democratic mask, it pushes for policies that are Wall Street wet dreams, including gutting and privatizing Social Security. Why would a group wanting you to believe that it has genuine Democratic genes be an advocate for further enriching Wall Street's Republican elite at the expense of America's middle class and the poor? To find out, just peek behind Third Way's organizational curtain. You'll see that its funders and governing board include no one from labor, senior citizens, consumers, environmentalists, small farmers, students, African Americans, Latinos, and other core Democratic constituencies. Instead of its 29 board members, 20 are Wall Street bankers, hedge fund hucksters, or venture capital vultures. This is Jim Hightower saying, Third Way dead ends at Wall Street. So, fronting for the selfish interests of its backers, it doesn't want any party championing economic populism, but the people do, and that's who Democrats should heed.
Need an antidote to the progressive blues? Want some good news about how grassroots folks are rebelling against the corporate powers and winning? Well, here's an easy-to-swallow pill for you, the Hightower Lowdown. Hightower's monthly newsletter will give you the lowdown, even as it lifts you up. It's 4 pages a month, jam-packed with facts you can use, actions you can take, and Jim's own Texas humor, all for only $15 a year. To become a lowdowner, go to hightowerlowdown.org.
This is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for stand-up Democrats. Our next guest is former Illinois Senator Alan Dixon, a moderate Democrat who talks about a day when Republicans and Democrats in Congress could actually get things done. And joining us now on americasdemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for stand-up Democrats, Alan Dixon served 2 terms in the United States Senate as a moderate Democrat from Illinois, rising to the post of deputy whip. His autobiography, The Gentleman from Illinois, recalls his 43 years of public service and especially when politics wasn't quite so personal. Senator Alan Dixon, thank you so much for joining us today on americasdemocrats.org.
Well, you're welcome. I'm delighted to talk to you, and you're quite right. In the days that I served, politics was a good deal different. The 2 parties spoke together, they did deals together, they functioned together, and things were a lot different.
You know, you describe yourself as a Harry Truman Democrat. What does that mean to you, and how did it inform your voting record in the Senate?
Well, it means that I considered myself a moderate. I had the pleasure of knowing Harry Truman during his lifetime. He came down to Southern Illinois on several occasions, and I thought him to be a fine guy personally, a good president. But I was a man who believed in a certain amount of moderation. I voted a number of times, of course, for tax reductions during the years of Ronald Reagan when those things took place. I voted several times for efforts to reduce budgetary expenses and work towards a balanced budget, and did a lot of things that I guess are not considered part of the charm of being a senator anymore. Although when I was in Washington recently, several senators of both political persuasions came to visit me while I was having a book sale at a place called the Monaco near the House of the Senate floor, and available for people that could run over between votes. But anyway, I believe in doing some moderate things as well. Now, I believe that, as an example, The present discussion going on concerning health care is a healthy discussion. We should work towards the kind of a conclusion to it that represents fairness to everybody, including the promise that if you have your health care and you like it, you can keep your health care. So I think there's a lot of things we can do to improve the program that'll get people to support, in the end, the effort the president has made.
Rather than just getting rid of it altogether, which is what the Republicans have been stumping now since prior to its inception, it makes sense to just try and fix what's broken, does it not?
Of course. And there are easily ways to do that. As you see the unfolding of this immediate impact of Obamacare, as it's called, by many people in many states, you see a lot of problems. But if everybody that has insurance can keep their insurance if it meets certain moderate standards, and if only those that necessarily have to have it are involved in the process, I think it would be a thing that ultimately would become rather popular and acceptable to the American people, just as, of course, Social Security quite obviously was, and other things that have been over the years helpful to the country.
We're speaking with Alan Dixon, two-term senator from a Democrat from Illinois. Would your record of you were a tax cutter, as you mentioned, reliable vote for business interests, including the coal industry, reliable vote for defense spending, would that kind of record would that disqualify you from a career in the Democratic Party now, you think?
Well, I think not in some cases. For instance, I was a member of the Armed Services Committee, very active as the chair of the subcommittee on readiness, which in those days had 38% of the budget, and I think that the average member of the Senate of the Democratic persuasion is as much supportive of a good, strong America as any Republican in the Congress. So I think, obviously, that's the sort of thing you can experience again and will experience again as time goes on.
Now, you were a self-proclaimed moderate, or centrist, if you will, but doesn't centrism imply a certain willingness to abandon political principle just for the sake of compromise, or does it really mean you have strong positions, but some are to the left and some are to the right?
Well, I think it means the latter, as you've indicated. And I'll remind you that when I was in the Senate, it was a different place. You see, in those days, we had quite a few Southern Democratic senators in the United States Senate who were moderates like myself, but from time to time exercised their own options when they thought they were right. I think that that kind of relationship works better, and I think we had an objective view of the country in those days that in many ways was more powerful for the use of the country than what we experience now. You know, right now it's just a sad thing for a fellow like me to see the relationship that clearly is entirely wedded to which political party you belong to. I don't think that's the issue. The issue is what's best for the country, and sometimes there are differences about that.
Now, obviously, and as you're indicating, and we're seeing it all the time now, and it does seem to be getting worse and worse. It's unproductive and it's uncivil in the Senate. And how did it come to pass, and what, if anything, can be done about it?
Well, I think it'll come back to normal again. I think things will change. You have these periods of stress and distance between the parties that occur from time to time. going all the way back to the Civil War, obviously, and before. So there are times when this occurs, and it's my belief that we will once again see the kind of experience where people talk to one another, and when there are differences, people from both parties meet together to solve those differences. Now, for instance, when I was on the Armed Services Committee, from time to time we had differences there, and then there'd be some kind of a subcommittee or even a separate committee suggested by the chairman of the committee, and the work would be done, brought back to the committee, and people of both political persuasions would support it. And that sort of thing is important. It's important because then you function and you make a difference for the country.
You know, you were considered to be part of the Democratic establishment in Illinois, the Daily Machine, as it was sometimes called.
I loved it.
So what was it like in those days? I mean, talk about that a little bit. I mean, that's, you know, it would just be so nice to get back to that, I guess, right?
Well, the Daily Machine functioned. It really, really did. And we picked tickets that were solid and took into account the geography of the state, which, as you know, is a big state with Cook County as the powerhouse in the state, but there's 102 counties, so there's 101 others that make a big difference. Some pretty good size, like my home county of St. Clair and its neighbor Madison, which are both across the river from St. Louis, have a total population, the two counties, of about 600,000 or 700,000 people. And, you know, in those days, there was actually a functioning party in all parts of the state that met on a regular basis, picked candidates, did the duties that were necessary to function well as a government, and I think brought about a good system in Illinois. Now, the proof of that is now Illinois, I'm almost reluctant to admit it, is so heavily Democratic in both houses and in the government generally, that there sometimes it doesn't function as well as it ought to.
Interesting. You know, it's everybody beats the drum for their own party nowadays, and I find it refreshing that you recognize that it can't just be one party. That's not how we were built.
Well, not only that, you know, it's been my observation, and remember, I served 43 years of elective public service. It was my belief and what I observed over the years, both in the Illinois government and in the federal government, in the Congress in Washington, D.C., that oftentimes the best functioning governments for the people were where the two houses were of separate political persuasions, as a context of which in my day, you got the kind of compromises you needed to bring about a useful government for the people of the country.
Again, we're speaking with two-term Democrat from Illinois, Senator Alan Dixon. You tell a story rather that I found amusing about when Senate candidate Adlai Stevenson III asked Mayor Richard Daley what advice he had for running his first statewide campaign. Please share with us Mayor Daley's response, if you would.
Well, Adlai, who had been state treasurer, so it wasn't his first statewide campaign, but he'd been slated by the organization for United States Senator, and I guess he felt it was his, responsibility to express his courteous appreciation to the mayor, who was, frankly, in those days the boss. Let's not belittle that. He ran it. The rest of us were part of the team. But so he went in to see the mayor. Now, I wasn't with him. I have this on the representations of others who claim the mayor laughingly told the story later. But in any event, when Adlai went in to see him, he said, Mr. Mayor, I came in to talk to you about the campaign and see if you had any advice to give me that I'd find useful. and the mayor leaned across, kind of first looked in his drawer. He had a habit of looking in his drawer all the time when you were in meeting with the mayor on the fifth floor. And he looked in there, and then he closed the drawer, and he looked up, and he said, "Adlai, don't change your name." And Adlai didn't change his name, and he beat the hell out of the opponent that year. I ran a bad third on the ticket. I'm grateful to him. Hadn't been for the way he won, I wouldn't have won at all. But incidentally, Adlai is fine. He's still there in Chicago. He's a good man. His father before him was a good man, and I liked them both, admired them both.
Okay. Alan Dixon served 2 terms in the United States Senate as a moderate Democrat from Illinois, rising to the post of deputy whip. His autobiography, The Gentleman from Illinois, recalls his 43 years of public service, and especially when politics wasn't quite so personal. Senator Dixon, thank you so much for your time with us today on americasdemocrats.org.
Thank you.
And this is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for stand-up Democrats. We want you to sit back and listen, but we need you to stand up and fight. Help get our party back to its roots and to success at the ballot box. Make your contribution to Democrats for America's Future to keep this show on the air and help elect stand-up Democrats. Go to americasdemocrats.org and click on Donate at the top of the page. This is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for stand-up Democrats. And now Bill Press and his guest, former Republican Senator Larry Pressler.
Midterm elections, some very, very important Senate races, as well as every member of the House up for re-election. And there was one Senate race out in South Dakota everybody thought was just going to be, kind of a routine race, not very exciting, because it's just going to be with Tim Johnson retiring, one Republican, one Democrat, and we'll see what happens in that red state. And oh, lo and behold, a big surprise. A former Republican senator from South Dakota says, I'm going to take a look at that, and I'm going to run as an independent. Senator Larry Pressler joining us in studio this morning. Senator, it's nice to see you again.
Nice to see you.
I remember the days when I was at Crossfire, and you would come in as a guest on Crossfire or on CNN.
Very nice to be here.
So you're still at it, right?
I'm still at it, and you're still at it.
Exactly.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So why are you running again? You were in the Senate for 3 terms after serving 4 years in the House. Why do you want to go back to the Senate, and why do you want to go back as an independent?
Well, I think I could make a difference in terms of ending the poisonous deadlock between Republicans and Democrats in our Congress. I think that we now have 2 independents in the Senate. If we could get 1 or 2 more, it would start to build some critical mass. There'd be kind of a swing group in the middle who would be able to break some of these deadlocks. I think, for example, that Senator Angus King of Maine has done a terrific job on the recent budgetary matters in working with both sides. So that is the main objective. A second one is that as a Vietnam veteran, I feel very strongly that we spend too much money on military operations overseas. I want us to be strong. I want us to have a strong national defense, but we basically have to modernize our military in terms of not spending. So both Democrats and Republicans vote for a lot of things that even the Pentagon doesn't want. So that's something I would like very hard to help bring us to a balanced budget. And then there are several other issues that I want to work on very much, and I could do it better as an independent than as a Republican or a Democrat.
When you travel now around South Dakota, and you have a ranch there, you have a home there, have not lost your roots at all in South Dakota, do you find, like yourself, that more and more people are kind of fed up with the Democratic Party or the Republican Party and kind of want to be somewhere in the middle?
Well, there's been a study recently by the Humphrey Institute. People in the upper Midwest do like the party system basically in their voting behavior. Generally speaking, we've had some independents in the region. There's Jesse up in Minnesota, Ventura up in Minnesota, and some others independents who've done well. But generally speaking, people would rather stick with Republican or Democrat. So I'm making the difficult argument that at this time in our history, we need more independents or at least another independent, in the United States Senate to see if we can break this deadlock, this poisonous deadlock between Republicans and Democrats. The problem is independents are not accustomed to giving money. They're not accustomed. Part of the reason they're independents is because they don't like politics.
Right.
And so as I go about, everybody says, oh, great, it's wonderful that you're running as an independent. That's such a good thing for our country at this moment. But they don't write out the checks the way Republicans and Democrats do. So I'm having a very difficult time in fundraising, but I'm making up for it with a sort of a new kind of a volunteer. We're going to have a very low-budget campaign, and I think we will win. It's kind of a learning process, right, for people to say, this is why having independence is important, and the only way independents can get there is if you help them, right? They've got to... Yes, I'm keeping a small journal called Running as an Independent about the contradictions. Now, everybody says that we need sort of a new political movement. Everybody says we've got to end the fact that the two political parties are mainly sieves of money. I mean, if you're the Republican or the Democratic candidate in South Dakota, you just get you get millions of dollars from out-of-state sources, and I will get none of that. But at some point, the public also has been very apathetic. The public's got to wake up and start voting for what they say they believe in, and I'm giving the voters, the people of South Dakota, the chance.
Now, you have also said that your candidacy is refreshingly different, not only because you're running as an independent, but as I understand it, you have vowed that if elected, you would serve only one term. Why?
Yes. Well, I'm 71 years of age. First of all, I'm in great shape, and I've said to my younger opponents that should they like a 5-mile run, if they feel I'm too old, I'm ready. I do that every day. So I've challenged them to a 5-mile run. But in any event,
that'd be a good. I'd like to see that. We could settle it that way. Just have a little.
Yes. But in any
5K
event,
and
I'm really not dying to go back into the Senate per se, because it's hard work, it's tough work, it's a tough place to be. I've been there for 3 terms, so I'm not really building my resume, and this will really sound strange, but I believe I'm doing this out of dedication to my country and to South Dakota. I'm a Vietnam veteran. I've been privileged with a number of things in my lifetime, a Rhodes Scholarship and so on, and et cetera, and having spent 22 years in Congress. And my wife says I should be enjoying retirement with our 4 grandchildren. But she's gone along with this, although somewhat reluctantly, but now she's enthused. But the point...
why one term? Why only one term?
Okay, one term, because I would not have to raise any money during that term. I would not be running for re-election. Senators spend about half their time actually raising money, and I just hate that. And I just hate the part of raising money for this campaign. But if I get elected, I'll have 6 glorious years of being in the United States Senate with a clear pledge to serve only one term, and I will not have to raise that money or angle my career or try to become chairman of the Commerce Committee again or something like that, where you have to jockey around in your caucus. I will be able to be a United States senator.
Well, that the members of the House and the senators whom I know, and I know a lot of them personally, they all hate having to raise that money. But you're right; they spend half of their time not in that office, not studying policy, not becoming, getting a better grasp of the issues. They spend them at offices which are nearby, arranged for them so they can go there and dial for dollars. And they hate it, but they do it. And what you're saying, as I hear you saying, is I'm just not going to do it.
Yes, right? and a lot of people are seeing the movie American Hustle now, and I've been getting a lot of interviews about that and so forth. But the point is, everybody thinks everybody spends all their time in Washington raising money in one form or another, legally or illegally, and they're right to some extent. So, there was a senator once from California who Senator Kuechel said in his last term, at the beginning of his last term, he said, I'm not going to raise any money, I'm just going to be a United States senator. And then he lost the next election because he didn't have any money raised. But I'm not going to run more than once, and this is hard. It's hard for me to run once because I've already got that on my resume. I mean, I've already been a United States senator, and it's a tough job.
So you are being too humble here, Senator. You mentioned American Hustle. American Hustle, for those of you who haven't seen it, it's all about the scam scandal here in the 70s that rocked the United States Senate because as part of a sting operation, federal investigators came in and dressed some of them as Arab sheikhs. They did this with some local politicians in New Jersey and United States senators and offered them bribes for certain votes, and some of them accepted those bribes and went to prison. There was one United States senator who was offered a bribe, and he said, "Get out of here, I won't take it." Senator Larry Pressler. Right?
Well, I mean, that's very kind of you. Yes, that's what the Washington Post said. And they wrote it again.
Be damn proud of that.
And yes, I guess I am. I'm a little hesitant, though, to go out campaigning and saying, vote for me because I turned a bribe down. And I'm not sure that's a little bit of a stretch.
I'm not sure that's a good bumper sticker, but it's good. It's a good thing to be able to say, and people should know it.
American Hustle is connected in this way: is that people believe quite correctly that most people are forced to have to raise money. If I get back into the Senate, I will not have to raise a dime in my limitation of 1 year. I'm pledged, absolutely ironclad, written it out. I'll serve only one term, and I will not raise any money during that term.
You did not. You didn't get a walk-on role in American Hustle, huh?
No, I didn't. The people who turn things down.
Are you portrayed in the movie?
Well, there's one composite figure that might include me. They really weren't exact. I guess I don't know. Nobody ever asked me. I'm not a movie maker, but there's one composite figure who turned the bribe down at first, and they say, "Well, that's." I turned it down. Period. And took different steps. So I got I got 15 minutes of immense praise. Walter Cronkite called me a hero, and I said I don't consider myself a hero for turning down a bribe. And there were different, the Sioux Falls TV station played my tape. It was I don't even have a copy of it. I'm going to get a copy of it, but the movie is relevant because it tells us that what people think about Washington in terms of fundraising. The United States senators have to spend half their time raising money.
Yeah. So this is, as I said, refreshingly different. A man who wants to is running for the United States Senate as an independent and vowing to be there serve only one term, so he doesn't have to spend all of his time raising money, and serve as an independent. Former Senator Larry Pressler heading back into the Senate as an independent. I said incorrectly that he is a Republican still. He's registered now as an independent and running for Senate in South Dakota as an independent candidate, and vowed to spend, if successful, only one term the next 6 years in the United States Senate. And Senator, again, thank you for coming in. Good to have you with us. So, you got the Democratic caucus and the Republican caucus. You're there as an independent. Who do you sit down with? Who do you caucus with?
Well, the Senate rules provide that an independent can be an independent and get two committees. They also, an independent can caucus with either party, and you can change that is, if I were to caucus with the Republicans, I could caucus with the Democrats after 2 years, or change. Of course, the caucus has to invite you to join them. But if neither caucus invites you, you can be. But probably we'll have a closely divided Senate, and it could well be that I would be sought to some extent by both caucuses.
Senator Bernie Sanders and Senator Angus King, who are now the two independents, they caucus with the Democrats, right?
That is correct.
So, but you haven't.
I have not made a commitment. I will see. I'll do I'm kind of modeling myself on Senator Angus King of Maine, who didn't really decide until the night before he had to.
Could you caucus with the Republicans one day and the Democrats the next day? Or
no, that would be a little too clever in that the caucus has to take you in.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
But yes, theoretically you could. Yes, you could.
Now,
yes.
I know we have a secret ballot in this country, so someone, nevertheless, a little bird whispered to me that you know President Obama pretty well for a long time, and you actually voted for him twice.
That is correct. I voted for him for conservative reasons, actually, but I'll be glad to tell you.
What do you mean?
Well, when Obama first ran, he said that he was going to get us out of these foreign wars, and I was afraid John McCain would get us into more foreign wars. So I more or less take the libertarian position that we need to have a foreign presence, and we need to be extending American power out, but we need to do it with a modernized military. We need to bring our bases home from Europe. I was a Fulbright professor in Italy, and right next to the university was a huge American Army base in northern Italy, also among the wine fields. But it's a World War II fort. It's a waste of money. We're wasting taxpayers' money with these overseas military expenditures. We should either close that fort or relocate it back to South Dakota or someplace in the United States where it'll stimulate our own economy. So that was Obama's position. No, he hasn't followed through that. The second conservative position that Obama had that I liked was on the Patriot Act. Obama actually voted against the Patriot Act in the Senate, or against the cloture on it, on the grounds that he wanted 2 amendments that would protect the rights of surveillance. And since I was surveilled in Abscam, and I came out just fine, but the point is that's always made me very sensitive about how powerful the government is in terms of.
Do you think he's followed through on that as president?
No, I've been disappointed. I mean, I like Barack Obama. He will come out much better in the end. He's going through a rough patch right now, but he basically his speech to the Democratic convention back when he was a senator was a libertarian speech. His speeches in his first campaigns were libertarian speeches in terms of foreign military involvement and in terms of preserving what's different about America.
And let me ask you this, if I can. You were senator in late 70s and the 80s, Republican senator. Is the Republican Party you see today the same Republican Party you belong to?
No, the Republican Party has left me. On civil rights, I am a co-signer of the amicus to the Supreme Court on gay marriage, supporting it, and we succeeded. I was one of 120 who signed that. That is basic civil rights. We now have gays in the military, and I feel strongly that that's a civil rights issue. In my state, we have our Native Americans. We have a lot of Somalians coming. We have a lot of Hispanics coming into our state of South Dakota, and we have to be very careful on civil rights. We cannot become known as the Mississippi of the North. So that's one thing that I've been very outspoken on all my life. I marched with Martin Luther King when I was a young man, and I was a co-sponsor of the Equal Rights Amendment for women, or women mainly in line, when I was in the Senate, and I've always been very strong on civil rights. So I feel the party hasn't moved in that direction. The second thing is that Republicans actually vote for bigger deficits because they vote for corporate subsidies. Republicans vote for all, and Democrats do too, vote for all military spending, and they vote for corporate subsidies. So therefore, that's why a Republican president's deficits are frequently higher than a Democratic president's deficits. And in particular, the Republican Senate votes for much higher deficits. And I'm in the Fix the Debt group, the Simpson-Bowles group. I'm a volunteer on the Congressional Advisory Committee, and the problem with the deficit has come from the no new tax pledge that Republicans have to make, which does away with any, it's not the new taxes, it's doing away with the deductions that need to be changed. So there are some things, but the Democrats, I didn't join the Democratic Party because they have a lot of problems too.
All right, Senator, we could go on and on. I'd love to, and I thank you so much for coming in today. You make me almost want to go to South Dakota and re-register as an independent.
Well, you don't have to do that. You just come out and help circulate my petitions. We have to get them in by March 25th, and that's tough because it's hard for an independent to get on the ballot because the two parties have it fixed up.
Well, lots of luck, and thanks for making us part of the program here. Senator Larry Pressler. You'll hear a lot more about him in South Dakota.
That's all for americasdemocrats.org. Thank you to all who made today's show possible. Terry Golway, Alan Dixon, and the entire Bill Press team. And thank you for listening. If you liked what you heard, please get involved in our efforts to keep this show going and to elect Democrats who are bringing the party back to its roots. Go to americasdemocrats.org and click on Donate at the top of the page. And be sure to find 21st Century Democrats on Facebook. For americasdemocrats.org, I'm your host, Jim Cuddy. We want you to sit back and listen, but we need you to stand up and fight. Join us, support the show, and help elect Democrats who will stand up for democratic principles with your contribution today. Go to